art auction. And so to give you a bit of a crash course education in pot gods and pot goddesses, we have the famed historian Chris Bennett, author of many books on the subject, and who taught me everything I know about ancient history cannabis. He's going to give a 5 or 10 minute presentation on what he knows about pot gods and pot goddesses. So I ask you to give him your full attention because he's going to blow all your minds.
Well, you know, when it comes to religious sacraments and stuff, cannabis is probably one of the oldest, if not the oldest, and most widespread. And its use in religious ritual goes back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. You know, as far as like hemp and stuff like that, current archaeological evidence puts cannabis back at about 35,000 BC based on tools used for the decornation of hemp, for making hemp fibers and stuff like that. So this puts it back tens of thousands of years. As far as smoking, you know, the thing to remember about cannabis is that it breaks down over time. So archaeological evidence is very rare to find. So a lot of times it's dependent on things like burnt cannabis, which has been carbonized and can therefore survive the length of time down to our modern era. And as far as people burning cannabis for ceremonial kind of religious purposes, that goes back at least 5,500 years. And we have evidence from the Ukraine of people burning cannabis in caves. And you know, we see the goddess Ashura here, and it's important to remember that like the whole agricultural age started in what's known as the matriarchal period. The matriarchal period, the period of the goddess, is the transition point after like the earliest types of religions are things like what they call totem magic, dressing up in animal skins to summon the herds of animals for hunting season, things like that. And at a certain point, humanity started looking around at where life was coming from. It was women giving birth to life. And they didn't really have clue in enough to know that the sex was creating life, because oftentimes you have sex and nobody's born, you know, and everybody's having sex together. It's not necessarily paired off in groups. So it was an age for thousands of years known as the period of the great goddess. And this is where the period of time where agriculture came in. And so the oldest types of deities involved with cannabis are these goddess religions and these goddess things. So this goes back into the very darkest, deepest parts of history, long before recorded history. And a goddess like Ashura here, who was worshipped in Canaan, which was the land that became Israel after the Hebrews went in and took over. Her cult would anoint their skins with cannabis as well as burn it. This is a practice that was adopted by the Hebrew religion and taken over by the patriarchy. But Ashura herself is just the Canaanite version of a much, much older goddess. And she's developed out of the same goddess that gave us Astarte, Ishtar, and a variety of other deities throughout the whole, not only the Middle East, but we're talking into the Mediterranean basin, Ostara and Europe and stuff like that. And this cannabis use spread with this goddess wherever it went throughout the whole world. So this is like old stuff, widespread. And Ashura particularly is the development of this goddess that was popular in Mesopotamia from about 2000 BC, Ishura. And her cult was particularly devoted to cannabis. And Ishura herself, even though she's worshipped in the Mideast, comes out of the Indo-European culture. So this is the same culture that spread the use of cannabis throughout the ancient world. We know this because Ishura's name is an Indo-European root that came into the Mesopotamian language. And it comes from a root that means rope because of the fibrous qualities of her sacred plant. So they didn't only anoint their bodies with it and burn it, but they were also making sacred weavings within the temple. And Ashura's worship has a lot to do with what happened with cannabis in the Bible and why it became prohibited. Some of you have probably heard about this stuff about the holy anointing oil. These references to cannabis, which appear in the Old Testament, which a number of scholars and an increasing number of scholars are coming to recognize as references to cannabis. We know this term cannabis is a reference to cannabis by following the modern term cannabis back through history, but also by comparing this term to the Mesopotamian terms for cannabis cannabu, the Persian terms for cannabis cannaba, and the Scythian terms for cannabis, which is the main word that kind of spread out throughout. And by the identical way that it was used by these different cultures, and always it was in a religious context and a medical context. There was no real separation between medicine and spirituality back at this time. Oftentimes, things like healing potions were accompanied by prayers to deities, rituals, and that type of stuff. And so there was a combination of this whole thing was in one relationship. So here in the Middle East, we can see like it was a major thing. It was involved with goddesses like Ishtar, Astarte, Asherah. And this isn't sort of my opinion. This is the opinion of Assyriologists, people that know the Assyrian languages, experts in the field. And it's just not widely known. And then we can see what happened in the Jewish religion is the patriarchal religion of Jehovah adopted, like for long periods of time, up until about 400 or 500 BC, Asherah was worshipped alongside Yahweh, the God of the Bible, as his wife. And we know this from archaeological evidence, because although it's not written like this in the Bible, we know from archaeological evidence because they're digging up all over the place and they're finding these Asherah figurines all over the area. And so this goddess was a huge part of that worship. And what happens when you follow these references to Cana through the Old Testament is that we see that it's at first it's revered as a holy anointing oil incense, which they'd adopted from her cult. Then it's part of a sacred marriage ceremony, which we see in the Song of Songs, where another reference to this occurs. The sacred marriage ceremony is another transition away. Once they realized, after the mother goddess age, and then they started to realize that men impregnated women, this gave rise to the age of the father gods. And there was an ancient ritual that was common throughout the Mideast, throughout the Mediterranean basin, and is still being practiced in some areas of India, called the Hieros Gamos, or the sacred marriage. And this was the concept of the god and the goddess coming together and in their conuptial union, creating the fertility of the earth, which we all enjoy. And this was all wrapped up around agricultural cycles, and likely goes back to the dawn of agriculture and the inception of agriculture with cannabis. It's important to remember that people like Carl Sagan believe that cannabis was man's first cultivated crop. So this is an ancient ritual that had been going on throughout the whole area for thousands of years. Around a few hundred BC, what was happening, cannabis was particularly popular with religious cults and temple use because its use, the psychoactive effects of it, combined with things like the flickering flames of candles and lights like that, and smoke in the temple would give like statues almost the appearance of life. And combined with rituals and people in wing costumes and stuff like that, much like the Native Americans were practicing here up until a few hundred years ago, the cannabis would add to that whole effect and create this kind of religious vibe. And it's important to remember that a lot of religious texts are written in verse, so they're kind of like poems and stuff like that. And so these rituals, they'd be like music playing, lights going, everything like that, would kind of create a trance-like state, kind of like what hip-hoppers get into when they start rapping. And that rapping, that poetry that would come out of them would all be written down. This is the religions of the world. All of the religions are written like this. They're all verse and music. They're all originally designed like that. And so cannabis played a huge role in that. And part of the way that cannabis plays a role in that is that cannabis has the ability for what's known as divergent thought. Divergent thought is putting two unrelated subjects together in a new way. And that's the core of creativity. And when you take a look at religion, it's always like metaphors and stuff like that that are used. And that's the type of consciousness that cannabis creates. And so its widespread use in that whole area. What happened with its suppression in the Bible was the Hebrew people were getting attacked by Assyria, Babylonia. And in this time, these different religious cults were like competing political parties vying for power. And it was almost like a unification process to bring it under one consolidated rule to deal with the oppression that led to cannabis suppression because of its widespread cultic use. The religion became just a means of control, so about laws and regulations. So that's what happened in the Mideast, but it didn't disappear. It reemerged in the whole Islamic period, and we see Sufis and dervishes using cannabis en masse, as well as the whole Ismaili religion. In fact, the term hashish and the term assassin goes back to this ancient Islamic group, the Hashishim, who would use cannabis, and they were heretics, and they were constantly being attacked by fundamentalists, so they came up with the plan of assassin to kind of protect their little cabal and their metaphysical knowledge. And in India, we see like Shiva and Kali. Shiva's worship goes back to the Stone Age. And Shiva is the lord of yoga and the lord of cannabis. Today, even now, we could go right down to the India and walk down the Ganges River in India, and there'd be sadhus and yogis partaking of cannabis. And the whole concept of cannabis in yoga is to blow away the ego and personality that we've built up over our lives and identify with, and get down to that common essence, that Shiva essence of us all. And they believe that cannabis is like the best tool for that, and have been using it like that for thousands of years. Cannabis is also used in tantric ceremonies to Kali, and this as well goes back to this heroes gambles of sacred marriage. These tantric ceremonies where they're still using cannabis goes right back to the Stone Age. And it's really interesting about this because it really shows the commonality of religion and how they're all kind of interconnected. As well in China, Taoism, totally in around with cannabis. Many of the earliest Taoists were using cannabis for kind of like astral traveling. Recently we've discovered a 2,700-year-old find of cannabis in China via these Indo-European mummies. Indo-Europeans are Caucasians found in China, central China, with perfectly preserved cannabis. And it still had like resin glands on it and stuff like that. So it wasn't like hemp, it was quality female cannabis that was grown for its psychoactive purposes. And in China, the term for cannabis is huma. And from this area here, it spread out throughout the whole world via the spice route and the trade routes. And when it reached into Afghanistan, Persia, and those areas, it became known as Hayoma. And they found a 4,000-year-old temple in Afghanistan that was dedicated to the making of a cannabis beverage mixed with a bedrock. It's about the size of a football field. Half of the temple was dedicated to making this sacred beverage.
All right. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. And this use spread into India, where it became known as Soma, and eventually got prohibited with a Vedic religion, and that's when it kind of bled into Shaivism. So we're talking about a religious sacrament that has been used cross-culturally by a number of different religions independently, and people always recognize it naturally, wherever it occurs, as the earth healing medicine that it is. And I kind of like to think that, you can look at these different governments and what they've got to offer us and what they've been doing for us. And you can look at these different religions and all the wars that they've caused and all the division that they've caused with their different beliefs. Or you can look at like Earth and Earth's own healing medicine, this like literal tree of life that has risen up here, and we're just starting to rediscover that has been with us for tens of thousands of years. And you take a look at the way that plant can like give us back our old growth forest by stopping us from cutting down trees, move away from soil depleting cotton, and feed the world's hungry with this like incredibly nutritious food. It's like the most digestible source of protein on the planet. And when you grow it for food, half the way to the plant seed, And this medicine is now looking like it can cure cancer. It's like curing people of epilepsy. Epilepsy particularly was thought to be demonic possession up until medieval times. And so people that would receive this medicine and have their epilepsy taken away thought they were literally relieved of a possession, So, and you take a look at all this, and then how this one thing right now in this time can play such a role in so many areas in healing our bodies, in healing our planet, and in a way, giving us back our traditional religion, the religion of the earth, and an earth-based thing that we don't need to go to any sort of fundamentalist religion for. Something natural that everybody can identify with and experience in their own way. So, that's cannabis and religion. Hey, you bet, cheers.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Back to the socialization and enjoyment.
Lycidian tree of life. Oh, fantastic.
So that, of course, was Chris Bennett talking on cannabis goddesses in the past and explaining that statue. So now you know that it used to be a duotheistic religion and then became a monotheistic religion. So if you want your own statue, I believe you can have a reproduction made for $300. I believe they're the same size as well, but I'm not entirely sure. They might be 10% smaller because that's what happens in a mold. So yeah, so that's part of the art auction. Here, let me just, oops, sorry, I should have translated. There we go. So yeah, that's what's going on there in that room.
Well, let's put it this way.
And yeah, I will put a little bit more music back on and leave the video on for a bit, and we'll just see what happens. So thanks for joining us here at Pot TV, and I'll talk to you soon.
Ja,